Hello all, I am Uneven Cuttlefish. Welcome to my channel. Glad you made it over here. I am a biologist, and I decided that it was finally time someone brings some light into the world and actually read some of these r/science articles that no one actually ever reads. It bugs me. Because no one actually ever wants to go in and read the article, much less the scientific article that most of these are actually based on, because, you know, you're basically playing 6 degrees of science. I'm tired of it. So let's go ahead and get started and actually see what some of these r/science articles have to say. Alright, so this one was posted about 2 hours ago by this account right here. Don't know who they are. Doesn't really matter. So the title of this is Study Suggests that Environmental Changes, and specifically climate change, could be the main reason why birds such as the blue tit are undergoing change in their physical features, more specifically in the brightness and intensity of their coloration. Alright, completely ignoring all of the comments because that's not even what we're here for at all. Doesn't matter. Those people in the comments are not experts. Doesn't matter what they say that they actually are. They're not. So the title is The Study Suggests that Environmental Changes, and specifically climate change, could be the main reason why birds such as the blue tit are undergoing change in their physical features, more specifically in the brightness and intensity of their coloration. So before we even go any further, the best thing to do is always going to be click on the actual article itself. It doesn't matter what people in the comments are saying. The best thing that you can really do for yourself is go and read the actual article before ever going to the comments, because people in the comments are always stupid. So with that, let's click it. Alright, so we're from here on Eureka Alert website. A little bit irrelevant in this case because the website itself is not actually what we're looking at. We're going to be looking at the study. So we're going to go ahead and just take a little peek here. Research suggests that change in bird coloration is due to climate change. Okay, nothing seems too awful wrong in there. Like the title doesn't really throw me off. The study was carried out over a 15-year period. Good, all right. In the south of France through a partnership between scientists at the UPV-EHU University of the Basque Country and the Centre d'Écologie Fonctionnelle et Évolution in Montpellier. All right, that was a fun read right there. All right, so work is going on a 15-year period. So glance at the article, and what we're actually looking for before we really read any of this, we're going to actually look if they cited the article that they're even mentioning here, which they actually do give the original source. We're going to go ahead and click that. Takes a sec, apparently. And they have cited Campus of the University of the Basque Country magazine, all right? So, by graphical reference, long-term coloration. Okay, all right. So, if you go down here, you can actually find the name of the article itself. We're going to do that. Control-C. And we're going to go to scholar.google.com. Go here. Control-V. Search it. There's our article. That's what we're looking for. Sometimes things are behind paywalls. There are ways to get around this. I will not go into them right now. Okay, I actually had to go through quite a process right there to find this because this is brand new. Eventually I'll do an entire video on how to actually access anything that you're really going to need when it comes to investigating science, excuse me. There are a number of ways. Typically your best option is going to be Google Scholar. That's going to have most of your articles that really the layperson is ever going to need when it comes to investigating scientific claims, especially on places like Reddit. Definitely Instagram. So let's go ahead and dig into this text and see what we can find out. All right, starting off with the abstract here, that is always the best place to start. There's like a French version down there. So we're going to go ahead and read through this. This is the first time I'm reading through this. We're going to do this together and see where we can go. All right. So starting out, climate change has been shown to affect fitness-related traits in a wide range of taxa. For instance, warming leads to phenological advancements in many plant and animal species. The influence of climate change on social and secondary sexual traits, which are associated with fitness because of their role as quality signals, is, however, unknown. Here we use more than 5,800 observations collected on 2 Mediterranean blue-tit species, Cyanistes cerealis and Cyanistes cerealis oligastre, to explore whether blue crown and yellow breast patch colorations have changed over the past 15 years. Our data suggests that coloration has become duller and less chromatic in both sexes. In addition, in Corsican CC, Olglycistre, but not in the mainland CC cerealis, the decrease in association with an increase in temperature at molt. Quantitative genetic analysis do not reveal any microevolutionary change in the color traits over the study period, strongly suggesting that the observed change over time was caused by plastic response to environmental conditions. Overall, this study suggests that ornamental colorations, could become less conspicuous because of warming. Revealing climate change effects on sexual and social ornaments are calling for further research on approximate mechanisms behind these effects. All right, we're going to break this down and basically go through line by line. All right, climate change has been shown to affect the fitness-related traits in a wide range of taxa. For instance, warming leads to phenological advancements in many plant and animal species. So phenological is kind of just how things present themselves, kind of how they are, colorations that they have, kind of their body type, things like that. So basically, climate change and how the environment is affecting these different animals is changing how they look. The influence of climate change on social and secondary sexual traits. So obviously social is interaction with one another, and secondary traits are things that, like let me give you an actual good definition. So secondary traits. All right, secondary traits are sometimes related to attitudes or preference. They often appear, that's trait theory of personality. So, as I thought, I just wanted to make sure, making sure is always okay, especially if you are not sure on something and you want to make sure that you are going to actually give a proper definition. So, secondary traits are things like chest hair. There's your secondary, your sexual traits. So, basically, those things are things that emerge during puberty. All right. Which are associated with fitness because of their role as quality signals. Now, quality signals is something that is very highly studied, and especially in birds, the idea that why birds, and especially male birds, have bright plumage, have bright coloration on their feathers is to indicate a sign of fitness, that in their environment they are so adapted to fit, they are so evolutionarily successful that they can have this bright coloration. They can accumulate all of these resources such as food or water or shelter, that they can have this bright coloration on their feathers, that they can overcome the disadvantage of having that bright coloration to where a predator might actually get you because of that bright coloration. That is a quality signal within that species. So again, which are associated with fitness because of their role as quality signals, however, is unknown. So the influence of climate change on social and secondary traits, which are associated with their fitness because of their role as quality signals, is however unknown. So that's what they're kind of getting into, is how do these secondary traits relate to climate change? So how does the bright coloration relate to climate change? So they use 5,800 observation collected on 2 Mediterranean bird species. That's fine. 5,800 is a good sample size. 15 years is a long sample size. It's not that long when it comes to like ecological studies, but it's still really good. It's not, a few months. When it comes to ecology and ecological studies, time ranges can vary, and the amount of time isn't necessarily and directly correlated to how well a study is. Now, 15 years for this is really good because we're trying to look on something on a longer scale. So they're looking at 2 different bird species here. Skipping ahead a little bit so I don't have to read the names. The decrease in association with an increase in temperature at molt. Quantitative genetic studies do not reveal any microevolutionary change in the color traits over the study period. So what they're saying there is the genetic analysis that they have has not shown any real and significant change within the species to where that would be reported, to where that would be significant enough to say something is definitely going on. So, strongly suggesting that the observed change over time was caused by a plastic response to the environmental conditions. So basically these things are just adapting to their environment. They are not changing genetically from their predecessors. Now, 15 years is quite a short period of time when it comes to looking at change of species. So that's basically what they're looking at here. They're looking at how fast these species are going to change in response to climatic variables. And now, this isn't an evolutionary study from what I can see just from the abstract. Granted, I haven't read the rest of it yet. This is not an evolutionary-based study. They're looking at the straight differences in the colorations in response to climate change. Now, those changes over time are going to lead to speciation and evolution when it comes to a mass scale. But microevolutionarily wise, that was a long, fun word, there's no real change. And that's fine. It's 15 years. Cool. All right. So starting all again, this study suggests that ornamental colorations could become less conspicuous because of warming, revealing climate change. Effects on sexual and social ornaments are calling for further research on the proximate mechanisms behind these effects. So that is their concluding statement. That's what they're really going to be looking at. And they're saying that obviously this is going to need more study, but global warming and climate change are going to have a massive effect on how these species present themselves. All right. So moving on to their introduction here, we'll read through this. I won't go too in-depth as much as I did with the abstract. Your abstract is really your guide onto what is going to be happening within this study. So when you look at a scientific article, you're going to first read the abstract because that's the first thing that is always going to be available, pretty much ubiquitous on any website. You're going to get the abstract. That is what you're going to base on whether you want to pursue getting this article faster or not. So when you read a scientific article, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to go abstract, introduction. You can somewhat look at their materials and methods, but you never get bogged down in that. And then you go to results, depending on what type of paper you're looking at. And then you go into discussion. And then depending on if this paper is useful for what you're looking for or not, if you're doing it for a paper or if we're just trying to read it, you might skip materials and methods and results altogether and go to discussion, because discussion is where they're going to wrap things up. So we're going to look at here at the introduction and see what we have. All right, environmental conditions play a key role in modulating the life cycles of organisms. As a consequence, in many taxa, trait expression changes as a result of environmental heterogeneity, especially in relation to current rapid climate change. Fish, mammals, and insects. One of the most commonly reported responses regarding plants and animal phenology, whereby many species are advancing their breeding periods as a consequence of global warming. By contrast, less attention has been given to the impacts of climate change on other fitness-related traits, such as social or secondary traits. So basically, a lot of studies look at changes in the species in regards to climate change when it comes to a large scale, not entirely when it comes to things like color plumage or how brightly colored they are, or just generally how they look, more how they adapt. All right. Ornaments have evolved to signal individual quality to mates or competitors, like I said before, determining mating opportunities and or outcomes of intersexual interactions. However, whether climate change influences the expression and contemporary evolution of ornaments is unclear. Yet a reduction in the ornament of intensity and variance can reduce their signaling and potential and the strength of sexual selection acting on them. Something can comprise and the adaptive capabilities of a population. All right. So that was basically kind of just an introduction again to what they said within the abstract, and they're going to go further and further into the history behind these things, and they're going to give you a little bit more information on it. And so I don't think I'm going to go into all of this. This is quite a long article. We're going to go ahead and we're going to drop down to the we're going to take a peek at the results, and then we are going to drop down to the discussion, and then we're going to wrap up. All right, so taking a peek here at the results, we have coloration across years. And so some of the things you want to look for when it comes to this is some of these figures down here. P-values are always a good thing to look for. If they are less than 0.05, you're in good shape. If they're less than 0.01, you're in really good shape. So looking at just this one right here, P is 0.007. That is less than 0.05. It is less than 0.01. This is good data right here. And looking at all of their data, this one right here is the only one that seems non-significant. As for which one they're looking at, I do not know. But when it comes to looking at data, if you wanted to go more in depth with that, you can do that, but you don't want to get bogged down when you're just reading an article like this to go back onto Reddit. So, continuing on. And I do want to say that when it comes to all of these numbers, a lot of these numbers are you're going to get bogged down in, and you're going to be reading for days, and you're going to be going back and forth trying to figure out really what they're talking about. Don't worry about it. Those are for the people and scientists who really, really need to know those things and really have to investigate what is being said and the conclusions that they found. For someone who's just reading an article, you don't have to read those at all. Having a good familiarity with them is always good. Scientific literacy is always good. I always encourage it. All right, so now we get to the discussion, and it starts out with our longitudinal 15-year data set, including more than 5,800 color ornament measures, shows that the yellow breast patch and the blue crown colorations of male and female Mediterranean blue tits have become duller and less chromatic throughout the years. That's it. That is your statement right there. That is what you need to know. That is what you've come here for. That is everything that you definitely would more than likely not get from those r/science articles. This is what you're here for. This is the results. This is what they found. If you don't trust anything else, that is the statement you need to trust. What they found is significant enough that they reported it. So it is significant enough that they reported it and that their statistics back that up. So, continuing on, over the same period, we detected an increase in temperature and a decrease in precipitation, mainly in core associating with the climatic variation with coloration, shows that color changes were partially associated with the changes in temperature and precipitation during molting, particularly in the more southern Corsican population. Last, we found that the temporal trends describing at the phenotypic level were not aligned with a change at the genetic level. Evidence that the described change did not represent a microevolutionary response, but rather an originated from plasticity. Overall, these results suggest an impact of climate change on the visual communication system of the blue tits. Given the potential role in these traits is a social and sexual selection and the importance of mate choice for adaptation. Our results raise the question of whether this reduction could affect species' abilities to react to climate change. So, that was a lot of words. They looked at different populations. So, this is not just me looking at one group of individuals and saying that that is representative of everything. You can look at that and say that that is likely what is happening in other populations, but having two populations is fantastic when they are showing the same trends, especially when it comes to the same climatic patterns. So what they found is the temporal, obviously meaning time, is that these changes at the phenotypic level and not at the genetic level, meaning that these things are not associated with a evolutionary trend. They're not associated with the genetic trend towards one way or the other. So they're not changing genetically, and these things are already there within their genetic code to become duller, to become brighter. So those things don't change. Whenever you're looking at a phenotypic change, that is not a result of microevolutionary response, as they put it here. The microevolutionary response would be if there's a genetic change and that change is going to be permanent within those individuals and those individuals' offsprings. A phenotypic change can change. Makes sense. Because when you're looking at a phenotypic change, that is a lot variable. Those individuals themselves can actually change with phenotype. So I do not know how long these birds last. Maybe it's 15 years. Maybe those individuals were not able to find as much food. Maybe the weather and climate in that area was just different for all those years, and maybe their favorite food source wasn't nearly as available. They became duller. Maybe they're going to perk back up again whenever the climate would shift back to its normal range, its normal area, its normal rain patterns, things like that. But if those things were to stay that way for long enough and it was reflected in a genetic change, then you're looking at a microevolutionary response rather than a phenotypic one. It has to be reflected in the genetic change rather than just the individuals themselves' ability to respond and change. All right, so we're going to look at we skipped ahead a little bit within the discussion section. We're going to look at this little section. I still have not read it. We're going through it at the same time. All right, this is sex differences in the temporal and climatic trends. We found sex-dependent associations in both populations with overall stronger trends in males than in females. This makes sense. Whenever you're looking at birds, typically the males, unless you're in a tropical setting, are going to be brightly colored and the ones doing all or most of the showing off when it comes to their coloration on their feathers. The finding opens exciting perspectives to explore the mechanism explaining the sex-specific pattern. Male blue tits face stronger intersexual selection than female blue tits, and thus it is possible that they invest more in ornamentation than females. All right, makes sense for what we know so far. This could explain why it has been described in Swedish blue tits that males start molting earlier than females. Yes, okay. That trend actually continues down to some males whenever it comes to migration in America will also start early. That's not described in this, that's just me telling you. Even when there are still young in the nest. As a consequence of this higher investment in ornamentation, warming or changes in precipitation regimes could have an even stronger impact on male coloration via their influences on male body condition or on parasite prevalence. Alternatively, because of sex-specific investment and sex-specific resulting cost, female condition may be more sensitive to the cost inherent to reproduction, such as egg production, than those imposed by climate at molt, and thus the climatic effects occurring at molting time may be milder than in sex. Yes, all of this makes sense so far. This is great. This is in line. We're not shattering any boundaries here. Really, we're not trying to change any dynamics. This is just adding to our knowledge of science in general. Fantastic. Okay, so what does it say? Basically, it says that male blue tits are faced with more pressures when it comes to the molting coloration because they inherently invest more into their molting coloration anyway for sexual selection by females. Females are going to invest more typically when it comes to egg bearing because they have a lot more risk when it comes to laying eggs and rearing young in these species at least. So when it comes to whether these species are going to be affected by climate change, well, if the climate change is affecting how males are able to get their food and their resources, it is going to affect them at a greater risk because they are inherently going to be putting more effort into their coloration than females because females don't need to do that. They're always going to be, in this case, looking for more resources for their eggs. That makes sense. That this is in line with what we know. So, the warming and changes in precipitation regimes could have a stronger impact on male coloration via their influences on the male body condition or on parasite prevalence. One thing I want to mention just before I kind of continue on, wrap this up, is that one of the reasons why birds are typically brighter coloration is an idea of the kind of, I want to say it's the disability hypothesis. I can't remember what the actual word for it is. Basically saying that I can have this really bright coloration, and I can avoid predators and get good food, but I can also keep myself clean of parasites. It's saying I am a good mate when it comes to how clean I keep myself. Keep that in mind, bachelors. All right. We're going to continue on here and see what else we can find. All right, this point right here is just kind of cool. I thought I would mention it. It says, whether sexual selection facilitates or hinders the adaptation to the novel environment conditions is still debated. You can look more on that in Condelin and Rochelle in 2008. On the one hand, sexual selection could promote adaptation, for instance, by favoring higher quality individuals. And it lists 3 studies. On the other hand, sexual selection might have detrimental demographic consequences. For example, by favoring the presence of costly traits whose expression negatively influences the viability of the individuals. Here, our data suggests that a reduction in the coloration of blue tits over time and a reduction of the variance of some of the studied traits. Given the potential role of the blue tit coloration as a secondary sexual trait, our results may be evidencing a decrease in the signaling potential of its color ornament. So, I'm going to go through that a little bit more. On the other hand, it starts out with whether sexual selection facilitates or hinders the adaptation to novel environments is still debated. So, sexual selection itself is different from natural selection. It's kind of how I describe it. The endpoint of natural selection, because all of natural selection has done is selected individuals who are fit to survive. And those individuals who are fit to survive are obviously alive at the end. But they still have to be chosen by females. You can survive and not be chosen. Sexual selection is the conclusion to natural selection because it is actually how fit you are within the environment to breed. And females are going to select for that. There's a great book which is right here. If you want to learn more about that, it's called The Evolution of Beauty by Richard something. I actually cannot see the back of this, and I feel bad. I'm going to look that up because I need to know. Richard Prum. There we go. I'm going to give him a shout out. It is a fantastic book, especially if you want to learn more about sexual selection and how biology has come a ways when it's come to how it views things, especially from the time of Darwin on. All right, and getting to the conclusion, and this is one, we're getting close to wrapping up. This is the good stuff. This is the meat. This is where, if you didn't even read anything else, this is the abstract, and this are what you're going to want to read. Our data suggests that in the past 15 years, there has been a general decrease in the coloration of blue tits breeding in the 2 Mediterranean populations. In Corsica, where climate has become warmer and drier across the study period, the changes in coloration were related to changes in temperature at molt, suggesting a connection with climate change. Also, our results discard the presence of a microevolutionary change in blue tit coloration over the past 15 years. On the basis of this evidence, future research should aim at analyzing the link between climate and ornaments in other bird species and taxa, elucidating the mechanisms linking climate to the observed phenotypic change and the consequences of the reported trends for sexual selection and adaptation to climate change. So, all in all, they found that coloration of these 2 bird populations were changing in accordance with climate change. So as it got warmer and drier, their coloration got duller and duller within these populations. It is not a genetic change, and so these things are plastic, meaning that they can shift one way or the other without too much difficulty, and it is directly related to their environment that they are living in. And so what they're saying is more studies need to be done on more bird species, calling for looking at the climate and the ornaments directly paired to one another. Now, does that mean they don't need to look at the genetic or microevolutionary changes within these species? No, not necessarily, unless they want to. They're saying that more effort needs to be put into finding the connections with bird species when it comes to just phenotypic plasticity relating to climate and how climate is going to affect these bird species going forward, because obviously with climate change, things are changing. Wild. Okay. So, and then they give their acknowledgements and everything else. So, with that, you have now read the article. That's it. That's everything that you need to know. Now, you can go back and read these articles, you know, how they describe it. You've read it for yourself. You understand it. Now, you might not be the paragon of all things science and understand everything you need to know, but things get lost in translation a little bit and often and a lot, from the scientists themselves to the scientific communicators to the scientific outlets, which is what you're looking at here, and then to Reddit, to people who didn't even come close to reading the article. So, now, knowing that, we can go look at a couple comments, just to see where we're at. All about passing on copies of their genes. Again, we didn't actually find any kind of genetic connection. None at all. This guy didn't read the article. Yeah, he's not entirely wrong. Nature is about passing on your genetics, but he didn't read the article. Alrighty, well, thank you for watching. That is the end of our video today, and that is just one science article from r/science that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be doing more of this series, just picking up random r/science articles, reading the articles themselves and seeing how well the science outlets reported them, and then seeing how many people didn't read them on Reddit. Don't take your advice from Reddit. Remember, science is a process. Science is how we investigate the world. Science is how we understand things better and make progress. Also remember, cephalopods are elder gods. I'm Uneven Cuttlefish.